Okay, so this is part 2 of Chapter 10, Media Ethics. Let's dig in. There may be conflicts between ethical precepts. To determine if your decision is ethical or merely a rationalization, try considering how you would feel if the shoe were on the other foot, whether you would think the same way if what you did was on the front page of the New York Times, how you would feel if the recipient of your action were someone you love, whether we'd expect this action from our children, and what our mothers would think. Of course, there are a myriad of other questions and assumptions and assertions that you could make, but when we consider ethics, especially within the media, these are just some things we have to consider. Your text also mentions the Potter box, which is a more systematic method of ethical decision making, and it's named after Professor Ralph B. Potter. And it helps us to just analyze a situation, separating different areas. So the first area is the definition. It helps us to define all the facts and or issues that arise in a situation. Second is our values. How do we identify the values in operation that drive or aggravate the situation? Thirdly are our principles. We have to select a moral principle to apply to the situation, and this can be a bit challenging because we have all different types of moral accounts and values and things that we hold ourselves accountable for and that we hold others accountable to. Finally, number 4 is our loyalties. How do we show active understanding of our own loyalties and why we have them? And so this again is something that guides us when we're thinking about how to make ethical decisions, especially within the media and as applied to our own lives. The role of commercialism in media ethics. In terms of making money, media companies are no different than any other type of corporation. However, media organizations are in a uniquely powerful position to influence the public compared to other types of companies because of the media content they create. At the core of so many media ethics dilemmas are the conflicting goals of serving the public with information as well as maximizing profit for the businesses. Examples include Southern newspapers that are supportive of the civil rights movement or that were supportive of the civil rights movement in the 1950s and the 60s that unfortunately lost local advertisers because of the news outlets associated with specific opinions. When we think about media types influencing conflict and content, we also want to consider that business pressures arise with various media types. For example, a book publishing branch may feel pressure from its parent company to emphasize books from established authors in a popular genre to generate sales at the expense of finding new authors or types of books that do not fall within established categories. There may be many examples in news coverage in which the reporter decided to beef up a story by including misleading imagery. Your text talks specifically about Kim Kardashian, as a representative for Skechers Shape Ups and how Shape Ups were used to tell people that, oh, based on our design, these shoes will help you lose weight, when in fact that wasn't necessarily the case, that you would actually have to do physical activity in order to lose weight. Wearing the shoes was not a conduit for success either way. We're moving on to ethics in journalism. The rise of citizen journalism brings along its own sets of challenges regarding ethical dilemmas in reporting. Editors must consider whether headlines and captions accurately reflect the important points of a story or simply aim to titillate. When private citizens are thrown into the media spotlight, privacy issues need to be respected. Photo editors can make elements of an image more dramatic through digital manipulation, but have to resist this temptation. Given journalism's unique role in society, ethical questions play a role in the entire news gathering and production process. Many ethical dilemmas have no easy answers and must be addressed almost on a case by case basis. Privacy rights versus the public's right to know. Gathering proof of wrongdoing is one of the biggest challenges that journalists face. Journalists try to obtain information that can help the public make better informed decisions regarding anything from political candidates to corporate wrongdoing to potentially dangerous food, drugs, and buildings. Federal law prohibits the media or anyone else from intentionally intercepting anyone's communication by wire, oral, or electronic means. Citizens have a reasonable expectation of privacy for oral or spoken communication. As you know, this is something that we consistently debate about, if we really have the autonomy and the privacy that we think that we have, or if we're actually being tracked and if we're actually being monitored. Going undercover. The legality and ethics of journalists going undercover often depend on how responsible they are in using these techniques. Questions range from whether the media were fair or somehow manipulated or distorted the situation. Victimizing the victims. Covering victims of crime sometimes makes them feel doubly victimized, as their names or faces are made public through the media. Yet, not covering rape and some other crimes or giving victims special treatment can also perpetuate societal bias towards the crime. And we see this a lot of times, especially as I was saying earlier, with people of color, marginalized groups, women, people who have non-heteronormative sexuality or gender preferences are often outed and talked about in a certain way in the media, while those people who stick kind of with the dominant societal expectation are described and talked about differently. I think a great example of this could be seen if anybody watches Law and Order Special Victims Unit. They cover cases all the time where a rape victim or a victim of abuse is treated differently even by the police officers and detectives because of what that presents and what it looks like when someone who looks a little bit more normal, who attends to more normal sexual guidelines or heteronormative scripts in the world, they treat them differently and they actually treat them better. Misrepresentation and plagiarism. Distorting or misrepresenting facts or misrepresenting relationship to work are all too common ethical violations, and this happens all of the time. This probably happens more than we even know, but you're dealing with people who are human, who are imperfect. And so when you consider, how this operates in the real world, plagiarism is a real thing just as much as it is a real thing in the academic classroom. And that's why it's such a big offense within the academy, because we're essentially preparing people to go out into the real world to be ethical, to make the right moral decision, to make and take credit for their work and give proper accreditation to those who have created work that they may be borrowing. And then the Society for Professional Journalists Code of Ethics, SPJ, which is featured to the right. This is a large organization of working journalists and student chapters that tries to ensure that journalism is being practiced professionally and ethically. The SPJ's code aspires to ensure that journalism is fulfilling its role in society, which often changes depending on who you talk to. The code says that journalists should seek truth and report it, and be honest, fair, and courageous in gathering, reporting, and interpreting information. And I think what's really funny is that when you think about the news organizations, especially those broadcast news organizations that we subscribe to and that we watch, they have their own professional journalist code of ethics, not all of which align with the SPJ. So I ask you, when you have some spare time, go and look at their websites, go and look at their advertising bits to see what they talk about and how they describe themselves as. And you'll be surprised that obviously everybody does not have the same moral or ethical implications, and they're okay with that. And even worse, their consumers have no idea that they're not being fully ethical. They're trusting what they're saying. Ethical issues in advertising. One of the main ethical issues from a mass comm perspective is false or deceptive advertising. The Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, and the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, are responsible for enforcing regulations regarding deceptive advertising. To exaggerate claims about goods and services is called puffery. So, descriptive advertising. This is when some elements of advertising that are fake, such as props, are not necessarily misleading. The FTC is assigned the responsibility to detect deception and find those commercials. So, for example, when we see food commercials, for those of you who may still eat McDonald's, you'll see a wonderful looking burger or a plate of food, and in reality, your food kind of looks like what is to the right. That is to enhance and to titillate you, to purposefully be in tune to buy the product. Okay. Puffery then is where claims are made in advertising are exaggerated, and it's an ethical and legal gray area. So an example that they use in their book for you is Red Bull gives you wings, and we've all probably seen the commercials where the person is drinking the Red Bull and they turn into an angel and they start flying, basically suggesting that Red Bull is going to just make you feel great and wonderful. While that may be the case, you're also probably going to crash. And so when we puff, we exaggerate, obviously, and we are showcasing information that is not necessarily true, that makes people more encouraged to buy a product or to subscribe to an ideology. Conflicts of interest in advertising. These can arise when individuals within an agency don't feel it's ethical from their own moral perspectives to help companies that sell products that are harmful to the public. Conflicts of interest also occur if an agency works for two competing companies. And then finally, our advertising code of ethics are used as guiding principles or values to be followed by the profession or industry. Three ethical norms, members of the American Marketing Association, AMA, which is pictured follows: do not harm, foster trust in the marketing system, and embrace ethical values. Um, the American Advertising Federation, AAF, lists on its first code: advertising shall tell the truth and reveal significant facts, the omission of which would mislead the public. And I mean, let me just say, like, yeah, it's great that we have these associations that set the standard and hold people accountable, but it's really hard to hold people accountable when you can't always track what they're doing. So it's only oftentimes in big cases or in situations where you may have somebody coming in and auditing that they're finding that, oh, something is being done that's misleading, or when a consumer complains, or when a lawsuit is filed. So even though we have these wonderful code of ethics, people are still running rampant doing what they want, and also they're disseminating this to the public. People aren't being critical thinkers because they're not media literate, and they're just taking it all in, and they are following what they see and trust, because people trust journalists, people trust advertisers, people trust what they see in the media. Ethics in public relations. The loyalty of PR people lies within the client, and often these professionals are asked to support questionable decisions or behavior. Digital media present new and unique temptations to public relations professionals. So conflicts of interest in PR. PR professionals may have unsavory clients who may make missteps from a public relations perspective, such as saying things they should not. PR professionals may also have to deal with clients who do not understand the media system, and they may have to ask that confidential information about the client be kept secret. So you think about any type of scandal that has occurred, more times than not, there is a PR person in place that is either going to play it out. Some of them may lose their jobs, but they are supposed to guide their clients in what they need to do and how to handle certain situations. The Public Relations Code of Ethics relies within the Public Relations Society of America, PRSA. The student version of that is PRSSA, and if you are interested in that, you should definitely email and reach out to Professor Dunn Square, because she assists with the organization of that student organization. Another is the International Association of Business Communication, and these both outline ethical practices for those in PR. Unethical behaviors include then lying by omission, giving a misleading impression, deceiving the public by employing people to pose as volunteers, and giving expensive gifts to journalists or politicians. Again, these are things that continue to happen. We try to regulate those, but there are people who slip through the cracks. Finally, ethics in entertainment. Entertainment content is not held to the same ethical standards as, say, a newspaper story or investigative TV report, but ethics are still important because entertainment helps shape society's belief and influence behavior. We see Katy Perry up here, who is dressed in, what she assumes to be true Egyptian garb, and this can be problematic because of the values that are ascribed to her performance. And so what we see this as is called cultural appropriation, where a person is dressing in a certain way but not really attending to or paying homage to the heritage of the people that actually look like that or actually wore those garbs, and is in fact benefiting and making money from this presentation when this is not of her own. It's one thing to actually appreciate a culture and to showcase your appreciation through the traditional garment wearing and acknowledgement of the speech, but it's another to not do that and just to walk around and celebrate that or use that to just make money. And so oftentimes we see people of color who are most disadvantaged are victims of this. In your book, they talk about how Asian and Asian Americans have faced both positive and negative stereotypes over the years, and we think of them, oftentimes they're described as the model minority. There are a myriad of examples of this. Finally, sex and violence. At the heart of the issue is the belief that exposure to media has some sort of effect on us. Claims exist that people who have been exposed to excessive forms of violent programs are prone to committing violent acts themselves. The same would then go for sex. And so we will definitely talk a bit more about this when we go on to our chapter that talks about media theory and research. But just really quickly, the picture to the left features, for those of you who may watch Walking Dead, two children posing in one of the iconic scenes where an older woman has to kill a child. And of course, both of these are children. No child was hurt in this photo, but you know, if your children are exposed to violent content and they don't have a counter to that, they often do what they see. And the same thing goes for adults. People who spend time doing certain things, if they don't have a counter to that, they often do and say and act on what they see, because we're very trusting of the media. The Dolce & Gabbana ad is one that is always very controversial because of what it presents. You know, it looks like this woman is about to have aggressive sex or may possibly be sexually assaulted. While these men stand and look on, no one comes to her defense. And some people argue, well, it looks like she wants it, while others argue it looks like she's somewhat resisting. And so people have to question, you know, why would Dolce & Gabbana put out such an ad to advertise clothing? Then what does that say about their ideology, about their customer, about the types of people they want to wear their clothes, and even more, what are their thoughts about assault and men and women's places in life? So as we move forward, you know, I want you to consider all these things, especially as you continue to develop your media literacy skill set. And this concludes chapter 10.